The kitchen smelled like butter tarts and pine, the way it always does at my parents' house in Barrie the week before Christmas. I had driven 2.5 hours from Toronto in snow that started light and turned serious somewhere past Bradford, and I had brought, because my mother had asked me to bring, a bottle of Riesling from Niagara-on-the-Lake, a tin of short bread I had baked myself, and a casserole dish wrapped in foil that she had specifically requested for the family dinner. My daughter was asleep in her car seat for most of the drive. She was 4 and had recently decided that Christmas music was unacceptable before December 1st, a position I respected. My parents' house holds about 20 people comfortably when everyone uses the good chairs from the basement. That year there were 18 of us, counting the kids. My aunt and uncle had driven up from Hamilton. My brother and his wife had flown in from Vancouver. My mother had put out the good napkins and the candles she saves for occasions she considers significant. My father was wearing the cable knit sweater he only brings out for events he wants to feel ceremonial. I noticed these things the way you notice them when you live far enough away that coming home feels like reading a story you half remember. We were between the soup course and the main when my mother stood up. She tapped her wine glass with the handle of a dessert spoon, waited for the room to settle, and announced that she and my father had made a decision about the cottage. The cottage in Muskoka had been in our family for 31 years. My parents had bought it the year before my brother was born. It was not a grand place. 2 bedrooms, a wood stove, a dock that needed repairing every spring, a view of the lake that made all of that irrelevant. It had been the fixed point of every summer of my childhood. My brother and I had learned to swim off that dock. I had proposed to my ex-husband there, which I preferred not to think about. My daughter called at the lake house and talked about it the way children talk about places they have decided are magic. My mother said that she and my father had decided to transfer ownership of the cottage to my brother. The table reacted the way tables react to good news. My aunt pressed a hand to her chest. My uncle laughed and said something about finally having somewhere to watch the hockey playoffs in peace. My brother's wife looked genuinely surprised, which I noted. My brother himself had the expression of someone who had been told something he was not entirely unprepared to hear. I waited. I assumed there was a second part. My mother sat back down. There was no second part. I asked, in what I hoped was a conversational tone, whether there was a plan for how the transition would work. My mother glanced at me the way she glances at the dog when he barks at nothing. "Oh, sweetheart," she said, "you understand. You have the condo in the city." She said it pleasantly with the mild finality of someone explaining why a child cannot have dessert before dinner. Then she turned back to my brother, and the conversation resumed around me as though I had not spoken. I picked up my fork. I kept eating. To understand why that moment landed the way it did, you would need to know something about the previous 8 years. My brother is 4 years older than me. He is charming in the way that certain people are charming, effortlessly and without particularly meaning to be. He moved to Vancouver in his early 30s for reasons that were never entirely clear, and that changed slightly each time he explained them. He had worked in film production, then in tech consulting, then in something adjacent to real estate that he described differently depending on who was asking. He was not irresponsible exactly. He was more the kind of person for whom practical matters had a way of sorting themselves out, usually because someone else sorted them. That someone else, for most of the past decade, had been me. I work in corporate finance. I have worked in corporate finance since I graduated from Rotman, which means I understand spreadsheets and long-term planning the way other people understand their native language, not as a skill, but as a mode of perception. When my parents started struggling after my father's early retirement did not go as planned, I was the one who noticed first. The pension was smaller than they had projected. The property taxes on the Barry house had gone up. The cottage needed a new water system and a roof inspection, and neither of those things was cheap. I did not make a production of it. I sat down with my parents one Sunday and explained what I saw, and we agreed, the 3 of us, on a structure. I set up a family trust account properly through a lawyer with documentation. The account was funded by my contributions made monthly, and my parents had full signing authority. It was designed to handle what I thought of as the family's structural costs: maintenance on the cottage, supplementary income when things got tight, the occasional emergency. The idea was that it would function quietly and prevent the kinds of crises that aging parents and adult children tend to have about money. It worked, in the sense that crises did not materialize. The cottage roof got replaced. A medical expense my father's supplementary insurance underpaid got covered. One summer, when the dock needed complete rebuilding, the account handled it without anyone having to have a difficult conversation. What no one revisited, because it had never seemed relevant to revisit, was that the trust account was funded entirely by me. My brother contributed nothing to it. He had reasons, various ones, across various years. He was between contracts. He was investing in a partnership. He was going through the divorce. I did not push. I kept contributing. The cottage itself had been maintained almost entirely on trust funds for 6 years. Property tax, insurance, annual maintenance, the new water heater 2 summers ago, all of it had come from that account. My brother had used the cottage, on average, more summers than I had, because he visited our parents more often when he was between things. He had taken his children there. He had referred to it, I had noticed, as our cottage, in the way people refer to things they feel they have equal claim to. What he did not know, and what my parents had perhaps not thought carefully about, was that the trust account had a single trustee. Me. The signing authority my parents held was administrative access. The trust itself was mine to direct. This was not an accident. It was how the lawyer had structured it to give me fiduciary control, but it had never come up because I had never had a reason to invoke it. Until that evening in December, sitting at my parents' table in Barrie, listening to my mother explain that I had a condo in the city, while my brother received the place that had been the center of my childhood, I had never had a reason to think about what that control actually meant. I did not do anything immediately. I let the dinner continue. I ate the main course. I helped clear the plates. I watched my brother accept congratulations with the gracious ease of someone accustomed to things going his way. I played a card game with my daughter and my nephew until the kids were tired. I helped my mother with the kitchen even though she told me not to bother. It was after midnight when I got my daughter settled in the spare room and sat down at the small desk in my old bedroom with my laptop. I read the trust documentation for the first time in 2 years. I read it carefully. Then I drafted an email to the estate lawyer who had set it up, asking for a meeting in January to discuss restructuring the trust's purpose and beneficiary designation. I closed the laptop and lay in the dark for a while, looking at the ceiling I had looked at for the first 18 years of my life. I was not angry. That surprised me a little. I had expected to be angry. What I felt was more like the sensation of something clarifying, like when you have been squinting at something for a long time and you finally understand what it actually is. The next morning, Christmas Eve, I came down early and made coffee. My mother came in while I was standing at the window watching the backyard fill with light. She put her hand on my arm and said she hoped I wasn't upset about the cottage. She said my brother needed the connection to the family more than I did. She said she knew I was busy and that I had my own life in Toronto. I said I understood. I drove home that afternoon. The snow had cleared. My daughter slept again and woke up somewhere past Innisfil and asked if we could listen to Christmas music now that it was Christmas Eve, and I said yes, and she chose the same 4 songs in a row until we reached the city. January was busy at work. I had the meeting with the lawyer. The trust restructuring took about 3 weeks to finalize. What I did was straightforward. I amended the trust's purpose to remove ongoing property maintenance as a covered expense and redirected the remaining funds toward a registered education savings plan for my daughter and a separate account in my name only. The administrative signing authority my parents had held was not renewed. The monthly contributions I had been making stopped. I did not tell anyone until the trust sent its annual statement in February. My mother called on a Wednesday evening. I was cooking dinner, my daughter was doing homework at the kitchen table, and I let it ring. She left a voicemail. Her voice had the careful quality of someone choosing words they have thought about. She said there seemed to be a discrepancy with the account, and could I call her back? I called her back after my daughter was in bed. I explained what had happened. I explained it the way I explain things at work, clearly, without emotional inflection, covering the relevant facts. The trust had been funded by my contributions. The trust deed gave me direction over the funds. I had redirected those funds in a way consistent with my financial planning. The administrative access had lapsed because I had not renewed it, and I had decided not to renew it. My mother was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "But the cottage maintenance?" I said, "The cottage is being transferred to my brother." She said that was a different matter. I said gently that I wasn't sure it was. There was another silence. Then she asked if I was doing this because of Christmas. Her voice had shifted into the register she uses when she wants to indicate that a response is disproportionate. I said I wasn't doing it because of Christmas. I said I had been thinking for some time about whether the arrangement we had made 8 years ago still made sense, and that the cottage decision had clarified some things for me. She said she thought I was being very cold about this. I said I was sorry she felt that way. We spoke for another 10 minutes, circling. She said something about family and about not letting money come between people. I said I agreed that money and family made a difficult combination, which is part of why I had decided to separate them. She said my brother had nothing to do with any of this. I said I knew that, and that my decision had nothing to do with my brother specifically. When I got off the phone, I finished the dishes and wiped down the counters and stood at the kitchen window for a while, looking out at the street. It was not the conversation I had imagined having. I had imagined something more dramatic, or maybe more resolved. What it actually was tired. Like a long thing that had been running for years had simply stopped running. My brother called 3 days later. His tone was different from my mother's, less careful, more hurt. He said he hadn't asked for the cottage, that our parents had offered. I said I knew that, and I believed him. He said he didn't understand why I was punishing everyone over a property decision. I said I wasn't punishing anyone. I said I had made a financial decision that was mine to make, the same way the property decision had been our parents' to make. He said that wasn't the same thing. I said I supposed we could disagree about that. The call ended without resolution. Most calls about these things do. What happened over the following months was quieter than I had expected. My parents made arrangements for the cottage maintenance themselves. There were some things they chose not to do that year. The dock repair got deferred. The exterior painting that had been on the list was pushed back. These were real consequences, and I did not pretend otherwise to myself. I was aware that my choice had costs. What I was also aware of was that none of it fell to me. I had been the person my family called when something needed solving for long enough that the role had become invisible, not just to them, to me. I had organized my finances, my schedule, my choices around a version of myself that existed to absorb what other people couldn't handle. I had done it, I think, because I believed that being useful was the same as being valued. That if I built myself into the structure of the family completely enough, I would be necessary, and being necessary would feel like belonging. The Christmas table was when I understood that those were not the same thing. I saw a financial planner in the spring. She was not a therapist, but she asked questions that felt adjacent to therapy, about what I was optimizing for, about what I actually wanted my money to do. I told her I wanted to stop making decisions based on what other people needed and start making them based on what I wanted to build. She wrote some things down and said that was a reasonable place to start. My daughter started asking that summer if we could go to the lake house, I had to explain gently that the lake house belonged to her uncle now and that we would need to make different plans. She accepted this with the practicality that children sometimes have and then asked if we could go to Prince Edward Island instead because she had seen a picture of red cliffs and wanted to know if they were real. We went to PEI in August. We stayed in a small rental in North Rustico, 20 minutes from Cavendish, with a porch that looked over the water. My daughter collected rocks every morning and lined them up on the porch railing. In the evenings, we watched the light change over the Gulf of St. Light, Lawrence, which does things with color that I did not expect and cannot fully describe. I did not think about the Muskoka cottage once. My relationship with my parents is not repaired exactly. We speak. We have had Christmas together since, though the dynamic is different in ways that are hard to articulate. More careful, maybe. More honest, in the way that things become honest when certain comfortable fictions stop being available. My mother has not again referred to the trust account, and neither have I. My brother and I text occasionally. His kids and my daughter get along. Some things work themselves back to a version of normal, and some things simply become the new shape of things. What I know is this. I was the architecture of that family for almost a decade. Not the risible kind, not the person who got toasted at dinners or thanked at holidays. The load-bearing kind, the kind that holds the structure up while everyone else inhabits it. And I had built myself into that role so completely that I had stopped noticing I had a choice about it. I am not angry about the cottage. I am not, if I am honest, even certain they were wrong to give it to my brother in some strictly accounting for preferences way. What I know is that the moment my mother explained, pleasantly, over Christmas dinner, that I had a condo in the city while she transferred away the place that held 30 years of my memories, something shifted into focus that I had been letting stay blurry for a long time. The drive back to Toronto that Christmas Eve, my daughter singing the same 4 songs on a loop, the highway clear and dark, the city lights appearing eventually on the horizon, that drive was mine, just mine. I think about that sometimes. Not the cottage, the drive. Have you ever spent years being the person everyone counted on for everything practical, every quiet emergency, every structural need, and then been told, gently and without malice, that there simply wasn't a place for you at the table? And if so, did you keep setting it anyway? Or did you finally decide to sit somewhere else? I used to think that being dependable was the same as being loved, that if I made myself useful enough, quietly, consistently, without making anyone feel obligated, the people I was holding up would eventually turn around and see me standing there. That is not how it works. I understand that now in a way I couldn't have articulated at 30 or even at 34, standing in my parents' kitchen on Christmas morning pretending that what had happened at the table the night before was something I was fine with. What happened to me and my family was not traumatic. There was no villain. My parents were not cruel people. They were people who had organized their understanding of me around my usefulness and then stopped looking further. My brother was not calculating. He was simply the kind of person who receives things that have been made easy for him and does not ask too many questions about why. The whole thing worked the way a lot of quiet family injustices work, not through malice, but through assumption, through a long accumulation of small decisions that no one ever revisited. The honest thing I had to sit with was that I had helped build it. I had contributed every month for 8 years. I had structured the account, managed the lawyer, handled the paperwork. I had, as one clear-eyed friend pointed out when I told her the story, made it very easy for everyone to take me for granted. That is not self-blame. That is the kind of clear thinking that actually changes something. When I finally looked at the situation without flinching, who had put in what, who had been acknowledged, what I had actually been doing and why, I could make a different decision. Not out of anger. Out of understanding. There is something I want to say about that, because I think it gets lost in stories like mine. The decision to close the account, to redirect the trust, to stop contributing. None of it required me to be cruel or dramatic. It required me to be honest about what I was doing and why I had been doing it. It required a kind of courage that is quieter than confrontation, but harder in its own way. The courage to stop arranging your life around what other people need from you and to ask plainly what you actually want to build. My daughter and I went to PEI that August. She collected rocks every morning. In the evenings, we watched the light change over the water, and she asked me questions I didn't always know how to answer, and I told her so, and she seemed to find that acceptable. I thought about the cottage sometimes, not with grief exactly, but with a kind of recognition. The place I had loved was real. The childhood I'd had there was real. What I had done for years to maintain it was real. And the decision to stop was real too. All of those things can be true at once. The quietest thing I learned from all of this is that the people who carry the most are often the last ones the room notices, not because those people are invisible, but because they have made themselves so reliably present that their presence stops registering as a choice. It registers as furniture. I was furniture in my family for a long time. The moment I stopped being furniture was the moment I started being a person again, at least to myself. I don't know if my relationship with my parents will fully repair. Some things do. Some things just become the new shape of things. A little more honest, a little more careful, less cushioned by comfortable fictions. Either way, I can live with the version of myself that made that decision. That is not nothing. For a long time, I'm not sure I could have said the same.